Bam, 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 bam. So today I'm talking to Seti Gershberg, and you are the director of a film called The Path to the Sun, your first documentary. Could you tell us a little bit about your documentary?
Okay, sure. Well, The Path of the Sun is a feature-length film that has two parts. The film deals with the topic of shamanism, ancient wisdom, and sacred plants, and tries to answer the question, what value does shamanism offer the global community today in the 21st century?
And how is it, what is it that brought you to this project?
Well, the project came about as a result of my interest in shamanistic practice and how the practices of core values of shamanism can lead to positive transformational growth within a human being and within society. So working with various shaman that I had met in the United States, I eventually wound up finding out about an old shaman in Peru who was purportedly a direct descendant of the Inca high priests. And he lives in the mountains, very high, about 4,200 meters, perhaps higher than any other people in the world as far as actual communities living at that altitude. They live in very primitive conditions. The name of their tribe is the Queros, or Eros in Quechua. And the conditions are extremely harsh. They have stone buildings that are small with grass thatched roofs, dirt floors, and they cook on open flames. There's literally no electricity, heating, or any form of modern conveniences. Yet this person apparently has some knowledge, some ancient knowledge that he was wanting to share. And I had a shaman friend who had come down to visit him and was very impressed with the work. So I eventually decided I was going to come to Peru on a personal mission as part of my path of positive transformational growth within myself as a person, trying to change my life the way that I live my life. And I decided to come down and work with him. And then after some plans were being made, I decided that maybe I should document my experience. I had been an artist in Chicago for over 10 years working on the electronic music and video industry, doing live projections at festivals like Lollapalooza and working with DJs like Mixmaster Mike. So I had all those skills of editing and filming and everything that you would want, but it was more artistic. It wasn't really like a long story that you can tell. So I decided to apply all these skills to a much larger project.
So your first intention was not to come to Peru to make a documentary. It was to follow this inspiration.
Exactly.
The path. Is that what the path to the sun is?
Well, the path of the sun actually is a representation of the ecliptic, and the ecliptic is the actual spiral path of the Earth around the sun and the way that the sun images us. And this shaman, being a descendant of the Inca, a lot of their belief systems surround Inti, which in Quechua means the sun or soul, and it's one of their primary gods. So the path of the sun is a metaphor for my personal path, or anyone's personal path along these concepts of Andean cosmology and what these shaman have to teach.
Well, I'm sure you go into this in more detail in your documentary, but could you talk a little bit about how you became integrated into this community and what that process was like for you, and maybe some of the practical experiences that you had as a result of being on this path?
Right. Well, the way that I got integrated with the community was one of patience, and I think there was something in my favor in that it was a personal path to learn to learn their knowledge, for me personally, not just to make a movie. So when I first got here to Peru, I didn't even break out my camera equipment. I found an organization that acted as an intermediary. They work with the Quero community. They have groups that come to Peru. They also bring the Quero to the United States. So in California, near Abu Shasta or Nevada City, there are places where the Quero go to do their work. And then people will come down to Peru. So I joined one of these journeys or expeditions, and we went to Puno, Lake Titicaca. We went to various sacred Inca sites. We wound up in Machu Picchu. We did ceremony on a daily basis. We did ritual. We did initiation ceremonies, and I got to know a number of them. And I got to know, in particular, Don Humberto Sonko, who is considered the elder grandfather, the Kudak Akelek of the Queros Nation. I worked with him and his two sons, his brother-in-law, and several other of the Queros. And then after this group expedition was over, I was in Cusco, so they would come visit me, and they would want to do more work. So after a month or so of that, they had invited me to their most important festival, which is Carnival, which takes place in February. It's a festival that celebrates the prosperity of their herds, llama, alpaca, sheep, and all that. And it's a very special thing to be invited to Queros, and not only that, but for Carnival. So of course I accepted, and at that point I explained my project.
Right.
And there was never even a hesitation. It was just, of course, yes, you're part of us now, you're part of the tradition, you're part of the traditions that we believe in, and you've been initiated, so yes, of course, we want you to do this documentary.
Awesome. Could you talk a little bit about what an initiation ceremony is, and maybe some of the other ceremonies? You mentioned you did ceremonies daily. Mm-hmm. What did that look like?
Okay, well, the main ceremony that is done is called a despacho. Mm-hmm. A despacho is nothing more than an offering, and it's an offering to what the Queros call Pachamama. And Pachamama is really a representation of a living being that is our earth. So very much like a Gaia concept, where the earth itself is a living being with a spirit, and we're all part of it. Animals, human beings, water, elements, everything has a spirit. And in that sense, the offering creates a situation where you're creating a reciprocal relationship with Mother Earth or the spirit world. So the despacho is really like it's a key that has a code that, when used properly, unlocks a portal which allows you to access other realms of existence other than the one that we're living on, which is our astral plane, our living plane. The Queros also believe, like us, that there is an upper world and a lower world. It's all based on energy. And the despacho allows you to access this through a reciprocal relationship. So when you give something to the Pachamama or the spirit world, you also ask for something in return. And that reciprocal relationship is called Aini. Aini can be practiced between individuals, families, small communities, and it's a reciprocal way of sharing. So that if I give something, then there's an expectation of something in return, but not necessarily at that moment. You just know you're going to be taken care of. And it comes from the heart, it comes from Munai or love, it comes from the heart. So the despacho is a way to get in touch with the spirit world in an offering way, where you're sharing in this reciprocal relationship to affect change in your life.
Can you talk about ways that your life has been shifted through your relationship with the Queros community?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, practicing this Aini relationship with the spirit world constantly keeps me aware that it's not just me, it's not just self, it's not just ego. There is much more out there. It puts me in a relationship that is sustainable and harmonious and balanced with the world around me. because I think about it a lot and I practice about it a lot and I'm sharing with it. So I'm practicing this Aini relationship, not just with the spirit world, but with the people in my lives. And that goes to a great direction of improvement in one's life. You are in tune with Mother Nature and with what's around you, and you're in tune with the people in your lives, people who you have relationships with, whether they're relationships with a store owner or people who you have much more time being spent with. That can go a great deal of improvement if you come from this direction.
And you talk about doing these ceremonies, the despacho ceremony, which is what you just described, right? Can you talk about the initiation ceremony a little bit? Is that something that you can share with us?
Sure. Well, there are a number of different initiation ceremonies. One of them is the what they call the Aini Karpai. Karpai is another word for initiation ceremony. So it's like a despacho, but you're doing this initiation. The Aini Karpai is a way for the Paco or Shaman. Shaman is a general term that we use to describe people who, on a number of different levels, fall into a criteria that we in the West could identify with spiritual practitioners. The Karo use the term Paco to describe themselves. So the Paco will share his knowledge, all his knowledge of the present, of the past, and of the future that he has learned and embodied throughout this energy sphere. And he'll be able to share that with you as an initiate, if you're open to it. It doesn't happen automatically, and it doesn't continue to happen unless you work at it. So
you're talking about an exchange of energy.
Exchange of energy.
So it's
right.
not like, here's my words, here's my teaching.
Exactly.
It's about being present and exchanging.
Exactly. So he's sharing that energy with you. The Aini Karpai also opens up our cellular memory to allow us to take a step back and put ourselves in a neutral or objective position with the world around us. So, for example, we tend to be the sum of all of our experiences. And in the West, many people react. They don't take a step back. So this initiation ceremony puts you in that situation where you can then take the step back and look at things from a neutral and more balanced, objective view. And therefore, your energy shared with whoever you're sharing with potentially has a much better outcome than if you were to react to certain things as they happen. However, when doing these ceremonies, it just doesn't get put into you. You're not just going through the ceremony and you get all the benefit of that, and then you can check off that box. You need to feed the seed. So like any seed needs water, and then when it turns into a plant, continues to need water and nutrients. You need to continue to feed that seed. So in a spiritual way, you need to continue to feed the seed as well. So working with more despachos or ceremonies is a way to continually feed that seed.
Seti, were you a spiritual person? Was this something that you were seeking before you came to Peru? Is this something brand new to you?
Well, I don't come from a very spiritual background, and in school when I was younger I focused on sciences. I tended to think more as an atheist for many years, and was not convinced of anything in the spiritual realm. But my path has brought me to that.
So when you talk about an exchange of energy with the Quiros people, can you talk about how that feels? What that does to you as a human being? What does that feel like?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's an uplifting feeling. The Karo believe in two types of energy. There's two manifestations of energy. There's light and refined energy, which we have right here up in this valley, because we're sitting up high near the upper world. And the upper world is filled with this type of energy. It's called Sami. It's light and it's refined, and it's neither positive or negative, but it's very, let's say, uplifting. There's another type of energy that's called Hucha, and Hucha is created from human interaction. Typically interactions that cause stress or anxiety or problems or worry or anger. Any of these emotions that come up create Hucha. So we're basically Hucha producers. We're walking down the street, we walk into a store, we have an engagement with someone that may not be a positive engagement, and we develop more Hucha. Hucha tends to be heavy and dense. So a lot of the ceremonies will remove this hoocha from you and fill you with the light refined energies, so with a very uplifted feeling.
And you can actually feel that.
Absolutely, tingles on the back of your neck, for sure. And then it stays with you for a while. So the more you're filled with this energy, the more it stays with you, and the better you're able to cope, within the world in which we live. So all this energy goes into an energy bubble around us, called a pokpo. So some people have very, very tight ones, and they're constantly worrying about the future, and they're constantly angry and guilty about things that happened in the past, and they just can't seem to get out of this space. They're going to have a very small energy bubble, and things are going to set them off like that.
Sure, I know people like that.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of people like that. And then you'll see other people that just seem calm, tranquil. Dalai Lama, he has a huge energy bubble that surrounds him, and it affects other people.
I agree.
So people look at him and can feel that energy, and they're immediately changed by that because they're receiving that energy from him.
Can you share with us how long you've been in Peru? And I know that half your journey here has brought you to the mountains, to the Quiros people, but the other half has brought you down to sea level into the jungle. So can you talk about kind of the duration that you've been here and how much time you've spent in each location? And then I'd like to transition into the jungle.
Okay. Well, I've been in Peru for about 20 months. And I use Cusco as my base of operations. It's a hub from which I travel from. So I've been into the mountains a number of times, and I've been into the jungle a number of times. The jungles were Puerto Maldonado, Manu, and Pucallpa.
Which are very close to here, Cusco, where we're sitting today. Yeah.
Well, Pucallpa is actually physically close, but it's difficult to get to because there's no direct buses or flights, so you have to go through Lima. If you take the bus, it's 20-something hours to Lima and then 20-something hours to Pucallpa. If you fly, it's an hour to Lima and an hour to Pucallpa. But if you could go direct, it'll only be about 40 minutes. So you kind of have to do that.
Okay, so let's talk about going into the jungle. What brought you into that direction?
Okay.
Which is a totally different community, right?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned before, shamanism is really a general term. There are a lot of different types of practitioners around the world who do different things. Plant medicine is something that has also been very important to my life, my path of transformational growth, positive transformational growth. Started working with the Lakota, doing inipi and medicine or peyote ceremonies in the United States, and found the work with the medicine to be very transformationally positive in my life. So in doing a documentary on shamanism, I wanted to have a wider exposure because these are two paths that basically lead to the same path, but they're two separate paths.
But
so
they're contained in the same country.
They're contained in the same country. So Peru is very much known for its curanderos, or ayahuasqueros, or washumeros, so people who work with ayahuasca or San Pedro cactus, which is like peyote and has mescaline as its main component, or other many other plant medicine remedies that jungle shaman or curanderos use to help people affect positive change in their lives, whether it's emotional or physical.
Okay, so as you then transitioned into the jungle, can you talk about some of the experiences that you've had there and with maybe some of the people that you've met?
Well, sure. I spent a good amount of time identifying curanderos who I wanted to work with personally. Very tricky situation. For example, here in Cusco, there tend to be many people who use plant medicine first as a business, becomes commercial. You walk down the street and see signs that say ayahuasca ceremony tonight at 6 o'clock. And these people tend to be very focused on making money and less focused on really providing a service to people. And then there are other people who will just take your money. And then even worse, there are people who can cause some damage. Luckily, the damage surrounding the shaman of the jungle is fairly contained. It does happen, not typically with honest, well-meaning people, but there are people out there that are on the prowl. So for me, it was very important to identify people who are of high quality, people who would be sought out, not that seek you, people that have a good reputation. So you hear from many, many different people that their experience with that person has been a good one.
What would be the criteria of determining who this person was? I mean, reputation is one, like you said, but how do you know who you're dealing with? I mean, how else?
Well, it's very easy. Word of mouth. Word of mouth.
So that's
testimonials.
okay.
Really key. So you can speak to not one person who says, "Oh, so and so was fantastic." You speak to a dozen people.
But what are you looking for when you're looking for a curandero in the jungle? What?
Well, someone who's honest, someone who has good medicine, someone who is humble, somebody who has knowledge of plant medicines. So these are all different things you can look at, and then eventually you're going to want to meet the person. And then for me, it's important to have a good vibration. You know, that you have a relationship with them, that there's not anything, you know, preventing a good relationship with that person. And there's lots of information out there. I mean, you can check all over the web. There's many people here in Peru who have experiences. There's tens of thousands of people throughout the world, probably in the hundreds of thousands of people who come to Peru have had experience with shamans. So the information's out there. You just have to go get it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend seeing, let's say, like a documentary and then just going with that person. You need to go beyond that.
It's a personal experience. And speaking of personal experiences, can you share with us some of your journey through the jungle and maybe through some of the plant medicine ceremonies?
Okay.
What I'm interested in is you are somebody from the United States who's seeking a path. You're on a path, and I want to know where that's taking you. Has it taken you to a deep inner space? Has it taken you to some space, I don't know, that connects you greater with humanity? I'm just trying to get a sense of where this path took you, because the Kiros path in the mountains sounds like it's very different.
It is a different experience, but it all leads to the same place. So working with plant medicines have a number of layers of assistance or benefit that can provide any one person. There's the open consciousness of using a psychedelic that allows you to perceive and look at anything from a different perspective. There is the curative value, both on an emotional and physical basis. Much evidence using plants like ayahuasca can help people with personal fears, with anxiety, with depression, any sort of emotional issue that a person might have, emotional or psychological, and really like jumpstart it. You can go to a psychologist for 5 years and make a breakthrough. You can take ayahuasca once or twice and have that same breakthrough. So you can short circuit the main system. Then you have the physical curing potential. So there's good anecdotal evidence that ayahuasca can help people cure certain illnesses. For example, diabetes is one. There are a number of people who have been identified that after using ayahuasca, their diabetes disappears. I know 2 people specifically.
Wow.
It's completely gone. I know people who have Parkinson's have had improvement. It doesn't seem to cure. Maybe it will. I don't know. But there are a number of physical instances of things that you can approach with plant medicine. And then you have the addiction. So alcoholism and drug addiction has been treated very successfully for many years using plant medicine. And then you have this connection to the spirit world. So it allows you to transcend our current plane of existence and transfer ourselves, our minds, our perceptions into other worlds, whether they're other dimensions or there are other realms of existence. And it can open your eyes to many different things.
And your heart.
And your heart, exactly. Thank you.
Can you share with us your first experience?
Okay.
Just a little, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, well, actually, my first experience was a very spiritual, even religious experience. The difference between religion in my mind and spirituality is religions tend to be dogmatic. They have lots of rules, and shamanism attempts to go to the same place, but different people practice it in different ways. So it was in Chicago, and I was brought to a place. I was brought to hell. I was actually in hell. I was with the devil. I was with the devil's minions, and they knew everything about me.
Wow.
This is maybe 40 minutes after ingesting the brew, and it was intense, and I could see where I was as clearly as I could see where I am now. I was in another place. And they were telling me that I had led a bad life, and they were attacking me on all my different psychological and emotional levels, and saying that even after I got out of ayahuasca, I'm coming right back here. I'm just always going to hell, so I should just prepare for it. And I kept trying to escape, and I couldn't really get out of there.
Was it a fearful experience?
It wasn't easy, but I'd done psychedelics in the past, so I was dealing with it, but I would definitely say dealing with a capital D. It wasn't a comfortable experience.
Right.
And I'm wondering why it's happening to me, and I'm disagreeing with it. And eventually what had happened is that I was listening to some music that was being played, which were icaros that were being sung in Spanish. And the icaros were talking about go to the light, go to the light, go to the light. So I imagined in my mind the light, and I got right out of the place where I was at, and I was going across deserts, and there were prophets, and there were people praying to the light, and everything was really good. So I learned, a trick on how to exit out of a situation that could be difficult under ayahuasca.
Sounds like empowerment.
It was empowerment, and it was very, very spiritual, very spiritual. So I felt very close to the world of spirituality that I hadn't felt in the past.
So you had your first experience in the United States. How did that differ from the experiences? I'm assuming you've had several here in Peru in the jungle.
Well, it's just a different setting. I'm not of the opinion that you must do ayahuasca in the jungle. Some people believe that because it comes from the jungle, but I don't. In Chicago, I was in a suburb. I was in someone's split-level house in their basement on a carpet, very uncomfortable carpet. So very suburban setting.
Right.
And then here, you're in the middle of the jungle and you're hearing all the insect noises, and you just have it's a different sense. Perhaps it's more relaxed. I can say one thing though. When I do ayahuasca, my body temperature drops a lot. And in Chicago, I became very cold and uncomfortable. So being in the jungle where it's warm, I felt very comfortable physically. But other than setting, I think if you have access to the medicine, you should use it where you're at.
What is the role of the shaman in the ceremony?
Well, the shaman is very, very important because the shaman is the person who is the guide, and he's the guide who transcends into the spiritual realm, and they do certain things. So if you take the shaman out of the equation, what you're really doing is you're limiting all these experiences that you potentially could have through the medicine to really just open consciousness and self-diagnosis. So the shaman...
Let me interrupt you for a second. Can you say that again? Open
consciousness,
and
self-diagnosis. So auto-knowing, knowing yourself from a different lens. So instead of you being here inside your mind thinking about yourself, you are here looking at yourself.
And is that what your ayahuasca experiences have been for you every time?
No, they're different every time.
They are different.
Sure, they're different every time, and they deal with different things different times.
For me, hearing you say those two words together, that was the best description I've ever heard of an
great.
ayahuasca experience. And I've had 3 ceremonies, and that personifies it. So that was beautiful.
So those are things you can do on your own.
Yeah.
However, having a shaman there as a guide can help in many different ways. One, if a person has a difficult experience. So, for example, recently there was an article in the paper where a gal in Colorado and her 2 buddies went out into the mountains and did psilocybin, or magic mushrooms. And she flipped out, completely flipped out. Took off all her clothes, had a physical fight with her friends. She had to be rescued. And one of the problems was that those people didn't know how to deal with that situation. A shaman would know how to deal with that situation. So there's a physical safety issue for having a shaman there. Secondly, they can look at you and look at your energy body, and they can diagnose. They can diagnose things that are wrong with you, both physically and emotionally. They can also find out things. So, for example, if something is happening in your life and you don't know why it's happening, they can see that within you. So there's a number of important reasons for shaman to be there as guides that we don't really use in the West. We try to circumvent it, but I think it's important that we try to access that as much as possible, because otherwise you don't get the full benefit.
Can you talk a little bit about the similarities between the two paths that you've taken, the two explorations that you've taken, the similarities between the Kiros and between the folks that you've encountered in the jungle? Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that?
Well, it's an accessing of the spiritual world. Mm-hmm. It's opening the portal to the spiritual world where you can transcend beyond our normal realm of existence to affect change in your life that, to me, turns out to be extremely positive. It's positive for transformational growth. That's where they're both going, but they don't have the corner on the market. Mm-hmm. So ayahuasca is not a panacea. It's not going to cure every illness. It's not going to cure every emotional disorder. It will help you deal with those things very effectively. But it's not the only thing that you should be doing. There are other things you should do on a regular basis.
Like?
Well, tapping into energy
Right.
energy on a regular basis, tapping into the other realms of existence to affect positive change in yourself and everything around you.
And do you think that people who don't have this experience in person can actually live this experience through maybe your documentary? Could that serve as an opening?
Well, what I'm doing is, in my documentary, I am not preaching to the choir. My film is not necessarily for people who are already engaged with plant medicines or working with shaman, although they will find it extremely interesting and they're going to want to watch it. But the audience that I'm really going after are people who are open-minded who haven't really closed the door. For example, there are people who are alcoholics who absolutely would never use ayahuasca because it is what they would call a drug or a bad drug, which is completely wrong. It's a medicine that can help. But because of bias, because of false information, because of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency identifying it as a substance that has no medicinal benefit, which is anything but the truth. It's just a complete lie. I'm going after those people who have an open mind so that they will then, at that point, take a look at shamanism in a different way and perhaps then seek out people to involve that within their lives. Because we're all trying to change the planet for the better, right? We want to make this a better place, right? So that's what we're doing.
Great. And if folks were interested in learning more about your film or learning more about you, how can they do so?
Well, right now they can go to www.thepathofthesun.com, all one word. Mm-hmm. In the future, I will have a Gershberg.com website that will actually be everything, but the other ones will go.
And we'll link to all that from our website.
Exactly.
And could you give us a schedule of what's going to happen with your film? When can we expect to see your film? And anything else you'd like to share with us?
Sure. That's always a good ending question. I always do the same thing. So where I'm at right now is in the beginnings of the post-production phase. So I've spent the last 20 months here mainly filming. So I have collected about 20 plus interviews. I do have a couple more to do in the States, but they're scheduled for June. And then I'll begin the editing process. And that should take about 3 or 4 months. The editing is going to be putting the movie together. I'll have 2 animation sequences. So the way that the Kero look at their world will be in an animation sequence to put it in a sort of a physical, visual experience for people. And the same thing for the ayahuasca experience. You know, you have to have that gratuitous little ayahuasca psychedelic. So I could bring in all my VJ skills that I used to do at the concerts to put that together. And then I'll be doing the audio. And then submitting to film festivals. So I'd like to do that on November 11th, which will be my 2-year anniversary. So I came to Brewer on 11/11/11. Right. So this will be 11/11/14.
14.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And one of the things that you sort of touched on, but didn't really say, is that you're doing this project entirely yourself. You've done your filming, the editing, the narration, the interviews, all the writing, everything is you.
So literally, 10 years ago, it would have been almost impossible
Right.
for anybody, any one person, to film a feature-length movie, documentary or whatever, it doesn't matter. Technology has improved to a point where you can do it. I created a mobile rig that I had with me. It's a 2-camera setup. So it'll look very visually pleasing. And then I did the entire film on my own. So I'll be doing all the animating, all the editing, all the audio, all that. That can be done today with today's technology in a realistic, cost.
But it's not just technology, it's passion and
Absolutely.
commitment. And I totally get that from you and talking to you about this project. So I wish you so much luck on this, and we'll be following you throughout the whole process.
Awesome, that's great.
Yeah, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Okay,
Thanks for
give me a
talking
hug.
to me. Okay.